Welcome to #Wednesdays Weekly, a weekly information session in collaboration with voluntary sector and public sector partners. Thank you for joining us for week 4 of the Virtual Facilitation Toolkit. The session this week is on collaborative note-taking, and our host is Maddie Hubbard from Action Together. Over to you, Maddie.
Thanks, Hayley. Hi, everyone. Great to see you again. Lovely to see familiar faces. I've met a couple more people from the waiting room. So, yeah, today we're going to be talking about collaborative note-taking, not polls and word clouds. So Google Docs and Google Slides and ways that you can use these in your sessions. So on the next slide, Hayley, just to say the kind of things we'll cover today are how you can use them to gather insight from the room and as a really accessible way to get everyone's views, how you can use them to collect notes from breakout rooms or to facilitate in different ways. And then there'll be a bit of a chance to ask questions at the end. And yeah, great. So as always, we're going to start just with introductions and breakout rooms. And given that we're now in week 4 and there's quite a lot of you that are coming back, which is brilliant to see, we thought today, as well as kind of doing introductions in the breakout rooms, to talk about whether you've tried any of the tools we've had from this training series or other tools that you've come across, and just have a bit about how it went. So if we send you off for 5 minutes just for introductions and to have a bit of a chat about how trying all these new techniques is going so far, and then we'll come back together. So Hayley, you happy to sort the breakout rooms? Fab. Great, see you in 5 minutes. Great. I'd love to hear from anyone just really quickly if anyone's found anything particularly useful, or if you haven't been to sessions but there's a tool that you've been finding useful that we could share with other people.
I love Miro, but the issue is there's not enough boards for me. I need about 100. And it costs a fortune, but I do love Miro. Hello, I'm Ali.
What I found is that when I just stick to using one in my training sessions just because for time issues. And you know, people getting their head around using different links, using different tools. I think for a training session that is on a certain topic, to then introduce so many different tools can be quite overwhelming. So I just pick one and stick to that.
Yeah, and that's actually really helpful for what we're talking about today, because I'd say the things that we're covering today are the most accessible of all the tools that you could introduce to your sessions, because they're things that most people know how to use anyway. It's just using them in a slightly different way. And so in terms of kind of design and what's different about using them, there's that kind of rule of thumb that whenever you have a session or a meeting, there's like the 40-20-40 rule, that 40% of the work should be the planning and design and the beforehand, and 40% should be what actually comes from it and the work after. It's just the 20% that's actually the time that you're together. And I think these tools are they're not going to make your meetings particularly kind of pretty or jazzy or excited, but they are going to help you move towards where you need to get to, and they can be really helpfully practical and useful. And in terms of accessibility, people find them a lot easier just to get on and start using. So on to the next slide, Hayley. The ones we're talking about today are just Google Docs and Google Slides, but just kind of ways that you can use them interestingly. So in terms of why use them, I think in terms of taking notes from a session, it's really helpful for people to feel ownership of their words and to see that what they're saying is being recorded, and that they can write down what they think in their own words. That in itself is valuable. Another thing that's really useful is a way to record what happens in breakout rooms, like the key points, the ideas, the conversation, rather than you send people off to breakout rooms, you come back and you just trust that something good happened and that it was a conversation. And another useful thing is that it can speed up feedback from those rooms. So if you're then going around all the different breakout rooms and asking for thoughts or comments, if they can show you what they said, then it's easier for them to pick out the interesting bits rather than them trying to kind of tell the whole narrative of everything that happened. So those are a few ways that I think these are useful in sessions that we run. So I'm going to start with Google Slides. So both of these are free and all you need is a Google account, which you can make with any email address your full name and a password. That you don't need to have a Gmail to sign up to it. And when you go on to starting with Google Slides, this is what the homepage looks like. So on the top right, you'll see that's where you're logged in with your Gmail account. And all you have to do, and those are all of your different presentations from the past there. You just have to press that plus button to create a new slide presentation. And then on the next page, you'll see when you press that plus, this is what it looks like. So it's exactly like PowerPoint, basically, except it's an online version. So all the usual controls there, all the usual slides, everything you'd expect. What's different is on the next slide, these top buttons, which means you can share the slides so that anyone can access them and edit them. So when you click on the share button, it comes out like this. And what you need to do is you need to choose anyone with the link as an editor. And then when you put the link in the chat of your events, anyone can click through and immediately they're on it and they can edit. And the only other useful thing, just if you're on your slides, is that top left button takes you back to all your other slideshows. So that can be a useful one as a quick tip. But in terms of how to use slides, I've found kind of 3 different ways that they're useful. One is to give everyone a link in your main session and then tell them in their breakout rooms to use a slide for the number of their breakout room to take notes. Another is to get people to do kind of an extended introductions exercise, to use a slide to reflect on themselves, and then they can take it in turns to share with the group. Or a third is as a really simple kind of entry-level version of those whiteboards that we talked about in a previous session. Instead of trying to get people used to a new technology, they're using one that they're probably familiar with, but they can still type their thoughts on there in little speech bubbles or kind of text boxes. So I just want to show you what it looks like. So here's an example of what the extended introduction exercise that I've used a few times looks like. And what you do is you have a whole slideshow of blank ones and people put their name at the top and you ask them to kind of take a bit, maybe post in pictures, do some text about their origins, influences, what matters to them now, current challenges. And you can see how you could change that to all sorts of different questions depending on what you need in your session. It could be, tell us about your group, tell us how it formed, tell us what matters, tell us who it benefits. And everyone takes a bit of time to reflect and then they share it. And you have a minute or so on each slide. You can see how, yeah, it doesn't have to be those questions in particular, but it's a way to give people a chance to think and then to share with the group and get to know each other. And the other one I want to share with you is where instead of each person thinking about things individually, it's to use Google Slides to take notes in your breakout rooms. So I'm going to share a link in the chat. And when you go to your breakout rooms, what I need to do is choose one person to be the scribe, and that person will either share their screen if you want, or they can just take notes on the slides. Choose the number that your breakout room is and take notes about the conversation. And when we come back, just do a bit of reflecting of like, how is that useful? When could we use this in our own sessions? Does that make sense? Anyone got any questions about what we're going to be doing just now? Or are you happy with that?
Will we see the link when we go into the breakouts?
Yes, so the chat up to this point will still be there when you go into your breakout room. But you can also feel free to just click on it now and it'll take you through. Great, so when you go to your breakout rooms, it'll tell you it's sending you to breakout room 1 or 2 or 3, and just remember that because that's the number of slide that you're using. And so you'll have 10 minutes for you to choose the scribe and then have the conversation and see the kind of notes being taken in front of you. So Hayley, you happy to set up the breakout rooms now? Brilliant, thank you.
Are we being dragged back now?
Welcome back, everyone. Sorry, I know it always feels like you're dragged back mid-conversation, and I'm sure you could have happily had much longer. So I just want to share my experiences as a facilitator of that. So I was able to see all your little boxes on the screen, on the Google Slides, and I could see, that room hasn't started writing yet, no one's on that slide. And I could like jump into the room and check they're okay. I could see like, that room's going great, they need help. It's almost like when you're in a room at a session, you can see groups that look slightly confused and are kind of like trying to catch your eye. You can see groups that have just run away having a great conversation. And it really helps as a facilitator to know you don't need to worry about people, to know who might need just a bit more explanation, or who the question makes sense to or it doesn't, in a way that, like, you know, breakout rooms, otherwise you just send people off into the unknown and you've got no way to see apart from jumping into all of them, which can feel a bit intrusive. But I was wondering about anyone else's reflections on doing that, if you can see how it would be helpful in your sessions, what was, where you needed more explanation, things like that. So there's a question in the chat about the differences between Google Slides and Jamboard. So I guess Jamboard probably looks better once you start adding lots of things to it and has more space to add thoughts in boxes. I think you'd have, if you were using Google Slides as a kind of similar thing, you'd want to do it only with a small group of people before it would look really too busy and overly full. But it's good in a small group if you think they really aren't into technology at all, or would really struggle with getting used to a new platform. Using something that people are more familiar with can help just mean that they trust it and get on with it a bit more quickly. And someone else saying, like, yeah, so issues with tech is tricky. So did anyone have find the tech tricky, or has any advice about how to explain it in a more accessible way?
I think it's really a question of becoming accustomed to it.
Mm.
The first time you use it, it will be difficult.
Yeah,
having that confidence as well to be able to use it. I just said in our kind of room that I'd probably practice on family, doing family facilitation, just so that you feel confident that actually when you're doing it, you know, for service users or with other professionals, that you have that level of confidence where you kind of, you've done your troubleshooting and you don't feel kind of, yeah, in a vulnerable position when you're the facilitator.
Yeah. I think trying to find my way around that and getting support from the group that was with me, that it seemed like we were looking at different things. I couldn't find what was there on somebody else's screen. So just trying to change the view. So, you know, you get that little thumbnail of people who are in your group. Couldn't find the button to press that, and it's at the top right hand side. So it's not, there's nothing there. So whoever was just chatting before about being familiar and how do you practice it and who do you practice that with, and you know.
yeah, definitely. And I think that's a great point.
Some people just do it almost naturally, and then other people really struggle a little bit till they're a lot more familiar.
Yeah, and added to that, I was in the same room with Julie as well. So we had somebody who didn't have couldn't talk. So we asked them to type into the chat, but Julie couldn't see the chat. So then I had to tell Julie what the person in the chat was saying. So sometimes that could get difficult, because if Julie's view is not right and she can't see the chat, then she can't follow it.
Yeah, okay, I see what you mean. So like all the tech issues can add up together and
yeah,
get really tricky.
Yeah, I'm going to be doing some sessions with adults with disabilities. So it's, you know, I'll have to guide. I don't know much. I don't feel like quite confident, you know, but I'm going to have to guide and help them to be able to do it as well. So it's going to, you know, you've got to be able to be at a certain level to be able to guide a group through it as well, and to work with the group. So, you know.
Yeah, definitely. And that's where I think experiencing it, so being thrown into it and being like, oh, that wasn't enough explanation, or that bit was complicated, or this didn't work. And then having a go yourself and kind of having both sides of the experience is really helpful to become a good facilitator. And it's definitely all about practice as well. And I think also people don't mind if it doesn't work, as long as, like, you know, there's no sense of kind of rush or urgency. Tech always goes wrong, and it's just about how you kind of help people figure it out.
Yeah.
I think you really need sensible sized groups to make these
technologies work well, these collaborative ones, because having been on a Miro session where there were like 40 people all trying to put post-its on, it was just a flurry of moving cursors of different colours. It was very pretty to watch, but I couldn't make head nor tail about what was going on.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like you say, you have to experience it to kind of see the pitfalls.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think with this, that's why I said kind of nominate a scribe, because I've seen people share a Google Doc link and then everyone can type in, and that equally becomes chaos once you've got more than kind of 2, maybe 3 people typing. So yeah, but it's definitely worth bearing in mind. Hayley, could you put up the slides again? Is that all right? Thank you. I've just got a kind of shorter little bit I wanted to talk about around Google Docs as the other kind of useful thing in the Google Suite that you can use for facilitation. And again, equally, it's free and you just need a Google account. And then on the next slide, I've just shown you what it looks like on the home page, because it's very similar to Google Slides. It's pretty much exactly the same. You've got all your documents there and you've got that plus where you like start a new one. And then once you're in it, it's exactly like Word. So even more than PowerPoint, Word is something, and a word processor is something that lots and lots of people feel comfortable with and would feel kind of able to just like get going and run with. And some ways that I think that Google Docs are useful is in a meeting, you can share responsibility for taking notes by nominating a scribe, for example. And it's useful to have that in a Google Doc rather than just in a Word document that's on their computer, because then you've got access to it and you can kind of set it up in advance with like different sections or headings or whatever kind of feels useful for that group. I've seen it be really useful for making a group agreement. This is with smaller groups, but if you want to kind of say, how do you want to be together today? You know, what will make this space accessible? How do you want to support each other? And letting people take turns in typing, or everyone kind of type, and you can kind of see the group agreement that develops. And another useful way you can use it is to collect feedback or ideas both before or after the meeting, because you can share the link in anything you publicize about the meeting, and it could tell people what to expect, what will be expected of them. You know, it could include how to use the tech or anything they might want to think about in advance, and to collect kind of thoughts or actions afterwards, and to have that open to anyone who is there. So those are a few ways that I've seen Google Docs used. I'm sure there's lots of other creative ways that they could be used as well. But yeah, at this point, maybe if we stop sharing, I just wanted to see if anyone had any questions, because as always, we treat these lunchtime sessions as just like a snapshot and a bit of a flavour of how you could use something in different ways. And then afterwards we share kind of, if anyone has any more technical questions, I'll go and find a good explainer video or a blog that helps you with kind of the technical aspects of it. But I'd love to hear if there's anything that would be useful to get a tutorial, like you said in the chat, about, or if anyone's got any thoughts or questions. And feel free to put them in the chat or ask out loud.
Yeah, well, I suppose again, actually kind of delivering like as a face, if because I usually deliver face-to-face like art sessions, craft sessions, and puppetry and things like that. So I'm going to be doing that. So it's not going to be, I'm not going to be asking people to type things on the screen. I'm not going to be asking people to do any of that. I'm just going to be making something and showing examples of what I'm doing. And then they're going to be kind of copying and look, kind of following the instructions. I suppose it's a series of instructions, isn't it? And they're going to an hour-long session, so that they're going to, by the end, have made something, and maybe by the end of 4 weeks have done some kind of little performance. And I'm so used to delivering this face to face, but this is different.
Yeah, that sounds brilliant.
But scary.
You'll be brilliant, Vicky.
No, it's just new, isn't it? That's all.
Yeah. It's confidence, I think, with most things, isn't it? And yeah.
yeah. But it's just that you know how to do it and things. So, you know, just like if there are any tips or anything that, you know, you might be able to say, oh yeah, well, you know, if you use this and, you know, just certain techniques and things, that was all, you know.
Yeah, that's helpful. I'll have a think. Certainly thinking about the way you design something online rather than in person is just give people so much longer than you think you need, I think, and be much more really specific and directive. Because obviously in person you can see the people that look confused. People can look at each other and kind of get a sense of what they're doing.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, no, that's useful.
And actually that's a nice link to the topic of next week's session, which is going to be kind of more of an open space about sharing, like a kind of virtual facilitation clinic almost. So kind of sharing challenges, or you know, if people have sessions coming up, they want to kind of have a chance to think through with each other, or themes that have emerged, or a chance just to practice tools that have come up in different weeks. We will kind of bring everyone together, gather what everyone would like to do, and then give you a choice of what we cover during the session. But yeah, hopefully it'll be a useful space to do kind of problem solving and sharing skills and all of that. And it'd be lovely to have you along. Anyone that has been trying this out or has more questions.
Yeah. Can I just ask Maddie, sorry.
You go first, you're all right.
The only thing that I was going to ask is, obviously this is really a snapshot, Maddie, and do you propose to kind of put any more in-depth tutorials where you could have a small group of us that have maybe not got that knowledge, where we're more inclined to be able to kind of troubleshoot with you, with yourself, I suppose?
Yeah, so hopefully next week will give us a bit of that chance, and it would be helpful if there's specific things you'd want to cover that maybe we can put on future sessions out, because yeah, it's been great to see the response for this and it's sounded like it's been useful. So absolutely up for carrying on running sessions if that's what people would like. Yeah, Joe, maybe drop me an email about the kind of topics you want to cover and we can see what we can do. Definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Deborah, sorry, do you want to?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, with the Google Docs, if say I was setting up a slide presentation, do you then just cut and paste whatever's in this toolbar as your link to share with other people? What did you? Yeah, is that what you did?
Yeah, so that kind of link where you make it available. So you say like permissions for everyone to be an editor, and you just press copy link, and then you can you can send it to anyone, paste that wherever.
Right, and then how long is that in existence? Like you're saying, it's on the cloud. How long is it? How long is it interactive for? Or
forever?
Forever.
So it's there forever. I think what you can do is you can then take away editing permissions. You can make it view only at a certain point, but you have control over that basically. And you can delete it, but at no point does it just kind of disappear.
Can you then save it as in a different format so that you can save it as locally on your computer?
Yes, you can download it as a regular Word doc or a regular PowerPoint doc. I'll send around a little explainer about how to do that. No problem. So Paul, I've just seen in the chat you saying you'd love help with Zoom, and that's great because there's an upcoming session. Hayley, are you happy to share about it?
Yeah, of course. I've just popped the link in the chat. So we have a session coming up on the 24th of March at 2 o'clock. Very similar session to this, but it's a basic introduction on how to use Zoom. And it'll cover little things like mute and unmute, using the chat function, setting up breakout rooms, lots of different things. But if you click on that link, it'll explain a little bit more about the session. And if you register for that, it should be really useful. And please feel free to share it wider as well. I think it'll be really useful for people that might not have that more of an understanding on how to use Zoom. Thanks, Maddie.
So unless anyone has any further questions, I will hopefully see you next week. Please bring all of your challenges and nutty questions and ideas along with you, and it would be great to see you there. But yeah, thank you all so much for coming.
Thanks, Maddie.
Thanks, Maddie. Bye.
Thanks for joining.